Good morning, good evening, and no matter where we are, I want to say thank you and getting the opportunity to speak to the team today. And I want to start with as we go through what Fornetix is. Fornetix builds a platform that's a cryptographic operations platform and key management service, and it's designed to address machine and human identity at unprecedented scale. And so what we're going to talk about today is that the application of the VaultCore platform in a smart factory instance for machine identity and access management. Next slide. So when you look at what VaultCore does and the way that we package our products, you can see that they're basically designed for things like tactical edge, data center infrastructure, and ultimately IoT 5G edge, which really we're going to focus on that last one today, because that's really where we're speaking about things that go. And then you look at the model and how we would do that, or actually argue it, it's probably a better way to say it, is that you see that there's the idea is the cost on a per device level and address the technology because we're supporting the device lifecycle. So it ends up being a reoccurring model, and the way it deploys effectively is a SaaS or subscription model. Next slide. This is critical. It really speaks to the innovation of the platform. It really speaks to what is unique and special, and it's the dirt equation. Yes, dirt. God made dirt, and dirt don't hurt. But really, what we talk about there is these 4 pillars of trust. The fact that you need a platform that can describe behaviors, that can interpret machine-to-machine policy, it can rate the trustworthiness of that transaction, and ultimately translate that into something actionable for being able to support, a requested operation. And from this perspective, you can really see VaultCore as being a policy decision point or a policy information point, depending on how it's deployed in the architecture. For itself, it absolutely is a policy decision point. And that becomes critical in a scale out situation for things like whether it's any sort of security object, public key infrastructure, which you're looking for like device identity, or even for smaller low-end infrastructure, symmetric cryptography that can be used in sort of a factory setting for device identities. Next slide. I wanted to, so look, this is actually a real world model of what we do in terms of how VaultCore is applied in these types of operations. And the idea being that there's a transition in industry where you can look at the fact that it's in times of yore, in the past, we would want to see cryptography would be applied at burn-in, and that would be the end of it. That would be, there really wouldn't be anything else happening. But with transitions, you see things like what Infineon is doing, or what Micron is doing with their Authentic platform. You really start seeing that their life cycle cryptography is becoming important, because it's also a way that the silicon providers and the folks that are supporting data in the factory are trying to move up market. And so technology like VaultCore becomes absolutely essential to allow them to do that. And if you see the backup slides, there's some information about that in there. I won't sit there and waste everyone's time going down lower in the stack, but just know that it's there. I think the critical part though is you look at cloud services or 5G, which if you think about what 5G looks like from a service-based architecture, it is very quote unquote cloudy. You can start seeing that, well, there are a whole bunch of things that cryptography becomes important to be able to build trust. When we talked about the dirt equation previously, so now we're going to talk about what that really means in application in terms of releasing cryptographic key material, being able to release security objects, in light of how that network is set up and configured. So this really helps drive that operational technology piece. Next slide. So this is something to note for, when we talk about semiconductor, programming infrastructure, the parts that VaultCore is providing, and we also have this idea of a coalition of the willing, where we've brought on other partner companies where VaultCore is sort of the foundation in which other technologies connect to provide those capability sets. In this case, the partner is Trustify. And what we're talking about here is this is a customer we're working with right now, where VaultCore is actually doing the key management crypto services and supporting the PKI root of trust. So that's certificate authority behavior. And then it's interacting with that Trustify platform, which is getting into the programming component of the device. And VaultCore is providing the policy, the controls, that authorization model, so that the Trustify solution is focused on, projecting that capability into the device. And in this case, what we were doing was to be able to allow for US sourced key material and management capabilities to be used globally for whether it's, semiconductor fabrication in the United States or using consulting organizations for semiconductor manufacturing in places like Taiwan. So that sort of gives you an idea of what VaultCore does in light of that use case. So moving on, next slide. So this is another implementation just to consider this in a secure PKI infrastructure. This is another partner of Fornetix we work with, is a Secure G, and they are building a scale-out PKI in which VaultCore is effectively the enabling infrastructure to that scale-out PKI. And what we're doing here is actually this is an opportunity under the DoD 5G effort for smart warehouse operation. Smart warehouse operations. So sort of that same idea for smart factory, but in this case, smart warehouse. And what you're seeing is for devices as they're being onboarded, as interacting with also 5G network, network repository functions as they're being enabled, VaultCore is being engaged as a policy decision point for those operations. And then the audit data then can be supplied to a security operations center to see trends in behavior. We think about some of like the machine learning, artificial intelligence, and the conversations we've already had throughout the meeting, the presentations earlier, can actually mine that data for trends in behavior. So that sort of gives you an idea of what you think about from like whether it's 5G infrastructure or fabrication, key management, key lifecycle. You see where the platform gets applied. And so next slide. Here's one of our use cases. This is for a smart meter manufacturer in Eastern Europe, ADD Bulgaria. They are using VaultCore appliances in both factory and supportive head-end units. So there's a transition from not just what's happening in the factory, but that life cycle handoff to the operational infrastructure. And that really demonstrates one of the things that why technology like VaultCore is important, particularly as when you think about what a smart factory is doing and how it's projecting its capabilities for not just for manufacturing, but when it gets into operations and maintenance. And so this is the idea where you look at how VaultCore is being applied and how it ends up being used to be able to provide that end-to-end control of cryptography.
Another 30 seconds.
Awesome. Next slide. Noting from a roadmap perspective, what you see here is sort of the idea of where VaultCore is going in the future. And we're getting into data, content, and identity, and we're already projecting that way. And so the idea of building trust. Next slide. And then sort of another way to see that what you're ultimately seeing the end goal of our development, the exercise, what we're going to talk about in the final ask, is to build a OT SASE platform so that you could be able to enable this sort of orchestration in a factory setting and as it projects outside of the factory to life cycle. Next slide. And it's what we're looking for, 35 million. A lot of that's to build out that SASE capability as a SaaS platform, move things over. Some of it is aimed towards acquiring small companies that enable our capability. And then you see expansion in the federal market to continue what we're doing for our work with the Department of Defense and Intelligence community, grow our international deployment and support, and then continue to grow our channel, which has really been transformational for us over the past year in terms of like the relationships we have with companies like Dell, HPE, as well as other bars like WWT, and things like along those lines. What we're also asking for is partnerships, particularly to be able to grow that channel and those relationships, because we do play nicely with others. And that's it. Thank you. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions, or want to throw them a walk by way and say, you know, Chuck, you have a pretty shirt.
Easy to say from sunny Honolulu or wherever you're at, based out of right now.
Indeed.
Okay. Opening the floor to questions from our panelists.
You mentioned M&A. So, I mean, obviously, I think people want to hear more about the technology, but what stuck out to me is it wasn't a large allocation. The M&A market seems to be really overpriced these days. I don't know what you're looking for, but what do you think you're going to get for $2.5 million that's going to help you grow your business?
We have a small company or two in mind that we would be able to gobble up quickly and use that to project directly towards sales goals.
And what are those? And what type of companies are you looking for that would help you?
Either a company, you know, what we're looking for is particularly companies with a services background, or being able to particularly do some things, or continuing to maybe some controls around additional zero trust components with data collection for us, so that we can, you know, better, you know, project out policy execution points in a zero trust architecture.